welcome to Dakota 101 with your host, Coach Tina Lane. It is a pleasure to be back in the studio today. It is warm but cold outside, because we're still in the month of April. But we have a wonderful guest in the studio who's going to make it even hotter than the weather outside. We have Elder E. Welcome, Elder E.
Thank you for having me, Tina. I appreciate it. Thank you guys for having me on today.
Yes, it's our pleasure. Well, Elder E, everyone, is a gospel artist, and I'm going to read a little bit about his bio, and so that you can get to know who he is. He has wonderful music out here. He is a man of God, and he preaches the word of God in his music. And when you hear one of his songs, you will understand what I'm talking about. Elder Kenny Easton is a pastor, a singer, a songwriter, and gospel artist. He is from Paterson, New Jersey. While growing up in a housing project in Paterson, New Jersey, it was his love for singing and songwriting that kept him from falling through the cracks of adversity. Explain a little bit about that, how the music kept you from falling from the cracks of adversity.
Yes, so I was born and raised in the projects called the Christopher Columbus Projects, or CCP projects, in Paterson. And so, it was a very rough, tough upbringing, a very rough environment. Especially growing up with, 9 other sisters and brothers. Thank God we had both of our parents. And so it was a very rough time during the 60s, 70s, and 80s, growing up in the projects back then. And so it was only my love for music, like I say, that, I began to focus more on that. And that kind of just, kept me from going, falling into the cracks, man, of drugs and, gangs and anything else that was going on.
Well, I understand that because it was just your love that the music drew near to, and that helped you out. So when did you start noticing that you had a love for music? Like what age, and was it influenced by your parents, or is this something that you fell in love with?
So yes, my parents, I used to have, listen to my fathers, because sometimes we would have our little family parties, little gatherings with our cousins. And so, my mother sang, my father sung, in the house and stuff. And then my older brothers and sisters, they began to get involved. My older sister, she had a little singing group, and they used to come to the house and rehearse. And then my older brother, he got involved with a group, so he used to sing and have rehearsals at the house. So around like 12, 13, then I start, really getting an interest as well into singing. And then I got involved with some friends of mine, and we had our own little group, own little thing we used to do.
What was the name of your group?
We didn't really have a name, but we like to get together and sing a cappella and in the schoolyard. Because we lived across the projects was across the street from 2 schools.
Okay.
So we didn't have a name, but we used to get out there and a cappella, just singing like that. But that's really where I kind of, got to learn how to listen, and learned harmonies. Back during those times, those days.
Excellent. So, and it seemed like, based on what you told me, like your whole family, your brothers and everyone had a love for it. And so you just fell into the right direction of going through the same thing because you loved it and formed your own group with no name, but you were still known, right?
Yes.
So how do you go from the group to now, I was reading in your bio, that you perform with the likes of Blue Magic and Force MDs in 10 cities. How did you get to that part of your career?
And so eventually one day I had a friend of mine, he played bass, we was in a group together. And so at this time he got us connected with another guy and we came together. Now this is the first time I'm forming a group with my brother.
Oh, okay.
And so my brother Bob, may he rest in peace. And so we formed a group called Pure Pleasure back in the 90s. And so from that, we began to perform. We had our shows. We had a promoter. He used to have shows at the local bingo hall in Paterson at St. Gerard's. And so that's where we performed with Blue Magic, Diva, the Force MDs, and the Force MDs was really checking us out because they came back again, not to perform, but just to see us perform. And so, yeah, we were together for maybe like a good year or two before we, fell apart there. But that was a special time because I got to be in the same group with my brother.
That was excellent. And that whole journey of coming together, having your own group, and performing with some of the, top people at that time, like when you say Diva and for Blue Magic and Force MDs.
Yes.
But also showcasing your talent, and your group's talent. That was important. So when you speak about Patterson, I can tell that you love your city. You love the town of Patterson.
Yes.
And we were talking earlier, and you was telling me that you're a family man. So give us a little history about your children or grandchildren, or.
Yes. So at one time I was married, and I have my daughter. Shout out to her, Lanice,
Yes.
and my stepdaughter, Ronte. And so back in the day, we just. That was my family, and raised my daughters the best way I can. And today I'm blessed with 4 grandchildren, and both of them have a boy and a girl. And so, and so they're very supportive to the church and my music, and I love them very much.
Well, how did your grandchildren at this time, if they look at a video and see the grandfather performing, how do they feel? Like, wow, we see grandpa or grandfather, I don't know which one they call you, pop,
yes,
on TV, on a video. Like, what's their feeling about it?
Well, at first, I picked them up from school.
Okay.
So about twice a week for a couple of years now, I picked them up from school, well, 2 of them.
Okay.
And so they've been listening. So once in a while, I turn it on, my little grandson to sing along.
Excellent.
And so now when I did the video for my everything,
yes,
I did the video back in July, they were in it. And so they were a little shy about it, but they were in it, and they enjoyed, they understood. I had them wearing the little Elder E hats, had on our little shirts, and so it was a blessing to me because that's what it's all about. I'm trying to get my family involved, and trying to be a blessing and let them know, that I take my walk with the Lord serious.
Well, yes, you do. And I like that you just brought that up because that's leading to your transition from what I read in your bio, that you had around, let's see what year that was 2004 came out his first CD project, Picturing Life Above the World.
Yes.
In which he wrote and co-wrote songs on this project. Elder E also did his first music video at the time with the song of the album called The Lord Is Near.
Yes.
So at that time, you made the transition from, I guess, singing, I don't know what it would be, like R&B to gospel. And what was that like to do that transition? I know like you felt like the Lord was calling you, but when you were in the R&B world to go over to the gospel world, it more supportive when you were trying to do projects or less supportive?
And so it's really like a personal thing because in 2000 I was going through a separation, divorce after 17 years, and so I had to move back in with my parents at 40 years old.
Okay.
So then I started having a serious conversation with God.
Yes.
That what do I need to do from here? What am I doing wrong? And, I need some help right now. And so that's when my life began to change because I decided to have a relationship with Jesus in 2000.
Yes.
And so during that time, I was walking to the local bodega across the street, and I ran into a guy that I knew from back in the day, and he was telling me about his church. And he invited me to the church, and that's where I made my transition from, R&B to gospel because the Lord started, doing something in me. I decided to seek the Lord more. And so I began to go to this church, Greater Faith. And shout out to Pastor Lassiter.
Yeah, Pastor Lassiter, hey.
And I ended up staying there for 6 years, ended up becoming a deacon in the first 2 years. And that's where I met two younger guys who were producers. And we got together, and that's when I did the album there. And my first album, and then did the first video for the Lord is Near, and with a lady from Brooklyn, and did the video in Patterson. And so that's where I started joining the praise team, and it was just a whole change, because I never liked gospel music. I wasn't into the church like that. But it's like when I really surrendered my life to the Lord and made that decision, to walk with him and open my heart up to him, that God began to do a new thing in me, and I just kept going from there.
And I can understand that because when you give your life to the Lord and you want to have a relationship with him, the opportunities are endless. And it's basically the Lord is waiting for your yes.
Yes.
And what you did, you gave the Lord your yes, and then after you gave him your yes, then you begin to do things where you expounded on your relationship with him. Like you said, the praise and worship team, seeking the Lord. I'm quite certain that you were reading the word, and just being around everything around his presence became part of your everyday routine.
Yes.
And then God just opened more doors for you. And that's important for us to understand. Sometimes the transition is not what we're looking to do.
Right.
Or we're not looking for.
Right.
Because it wasn't something that you were going to seek, that you wanted to do gospel music. But you had this encounter with someone, and next thing you know, you're on a whole new journey.
Yes.
And the Lord is just opening doors for you. And so that's a blessing to hear. That's a testimony of what God can just transition your life as you were going through, you said, your own personal stuff, like you were going through in transition at 40 years old, moving back with your mom. But look how at that time you may think, oh, what's going to be my next step? But the Lord bless you.
Yes.
In the midst of what you could have considered like a turmoil, because you're going through a challenge right now.
Yes.
The blessing still came. God opened more doors for you.
Yes.
So I'm like, it's amazing to hear that testimony, because every walk don't always come that we start off with seeking that first. Like seeking the gospel. You went one way, but the Lord opened another way for you. And so basically now what you told me earlier today, that you went from Elder E, well, you're still Elder E, but to Pastor E.
Yes.
So tell us about that journey from now gospel singer, being a gospel artist, but now being a man of God that's ministering the word.
Yes. And so as you're saying, this was never a dream of mine, a goal of mine. Never knew about these titles. I came to the church for help.
Right.
I started from the back, sitting in the back, coming for help. And so, it's like Jeremiah 29:11, when God said, I know the plans I have for your life.
Yes.
Not to harm you, but to bless you. And so when the callings came, I just prayed about it and accepted it, and walked in it. Because I began to see that I had a compassion for people. And so I had a compassion to do outreach, and I was always out there, helping to feed the poor and giving out tracts and stuff like that. And so the first church that I was at, I was there for 6 years. I became a deacon, and then he asked me to be a minister. And then I became an evangelist. I didn't know what that was, but, I was already doing the work. And so from there, I moved on to, after 6 years there, went on to another church, another ministry, and where I was just evangelist, minister. And then from there, another ministry. And so 2016, my pastor there asked me to be an elder.